I'm Michelle with the Book Dragon, and today we're joined by authors Ceri Williams and Drew Neary, authors of The Clockmaker. Hi, Ceri.
Hello.
Hi, Drew.
Hi, hello.
And they've very kindly agreed to let me interview them during their book tour week, so you can find out more about The Clockmaker and their writing process.
Oh,
Thank you so
lovely, lovely,
much.
can't wait.
Yeah. So I'm going to start by asking you where the idea for the story of The Clockmaker came from.
Okay, so the short version is, so we started writing a book called Optics after we met one day in a coffee shop and decided to write. And so we were writing Optics, and it was a Saturday afternoon. Newcastle were on the radio playing football, and I was doing a bit of writing. And I was trying to think of a character for a certain plot point. And so I went into the garden. My kids were running around the garden as they do, and I was just looking at this tree, deciding if I was going to have a prune it or not. And then suddenly the idea of the clockmaker, his character, popped into my head. And then a couple of seconds later, his constructs, his little creations popped into my head. And I went up and wrote down as fast as I could. And that was basically where the character came from. We started writing extracts from the bits that have been writing. We started putting them online, and people started saying, "Oh, I really want to know more about this character. This character is really interesting. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more." And so, like, what we used was he was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 pages in Optics. The character was, and then he started to grow and grow and grow, and then people started asking for short stories about him and that sort of stuff. And so eventually, he hasn't, 2 years after that day, he has his own novel, and I still haven't pruned the tree, but there we go. Yeah, that is basically it. It was just that day standing in the garden. That was it. I don't know what else to say, really. That's how it happened.
Well, Optics that's still, on the boil.
Mm-hmm.
That was primarily sci-fi fantasy.
Okay.
So, well, it still is. So the Clockmaker being a completely different genre, it just shows, I don't know, that we can write in different genres. But the Clockmaker himself as a character, with the constructs and the mechanical creatures that were all Andy's ideas, it lent itself to a different sort of more supernatural horror genre. And as we started working through it, Andy primarily did, I know that's another question coming up, but I decided, because the Clockmaker was actually quite supernatural, I decided that I would write the boring bits. So the more normal, the more mundane. So I started writing Ned and Duncan. So yeah. So yes, it sort of, it grew.
Yeah, it really did. What we expected to be just a short part. I mean, this is before we'd only been around a short period of time, and together, so we were trying to like gauge interest. I didn't know what people were going to think of, because I'd never written anything before ever, of what people would think of it, and it was just there's just something stuck. I mean, I did really like the character. He struck a chord. It is supernatural. It's horror with a small h though, so it's not like a slasher type thing, more of a you look into the corner of your eye. Ceri says she writes the mundane things, but that's not exactly true. But the thing is, like, it has to have a balance in reality. So to make the other things more supernatural, that the story has to be believable, the characters has to be believable, and it has to be where you have a situation where, like, we all wash dishes. Okay, we all mow the lawn, and those sort of things. So Ceri does not just write about people washing dishes and mowing lawns at all. That's doing us a way big disservice. But we try to balance the supernatural. So even where Ceri's writing about the the day-to-day stuff, she doesn't just do that, but you're always looking out the corner of your eye
in the book.
And waiting for something to happen, and so it balances it, and it makes it more believable, and the characters become more human if they do more human things. which is
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah.
The contrast works really well. I mean, I think there's the temporary relief, isn't there, when you maybe go back to the more different, but you're waiting for it to go back to the other bit. So there's that
Yeah.
tension there. It's really cleverly done. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and it's important the characters have depth. We don't want, especially the main characters, Annette, her son, the clockmaker himself. They don't just turn up, do something evil, and then that's it. And then they come back a bit like like Freddy and Jason and all those sort of guys in the movie.
Yeah.
You kind of don't know anything much about them apart from they just turn up and stab someone and then or you'll follow somebody down the cellar or something like that. We wanted them to have a bit of a backstory, not just because it makes it more believable, it makes the story better, has depth, but I don't know, we kind of like want to explore them as well. And like with the second one, which I know you'll talk about, we do that in a lot more detail. But it's I don't know, we like to know a little bit what makes our characters tick as well.
Tick, clockmaker. I see what you did there.
But by the end of writing the Clockmaker, I just wanted to kill Annette.
You were sick of writing her.
We say I love Annette because Annette's character grows. She's sort of like the grieving widow with a young boy, escaping London from the scars of World War II. She's seen it all, the bombs and everything. She's got this young child. She moves up to Scotland to take over an ancestral place.
Yeah, but she's still a drip.
But she grows. She grows during the book, and at the end, she's pretty hardcore. But no, I wouldn't spoil it. But yeah, okay, but yeah, she develops and she finds her inner steel.
Yeah, that's the way of putting it.
She finds her inner steel as the story develops, because as in a lot of mothers do during adversity. During those times, the stories you read about what parents did. Especially like the Lion Girls and all these sort of things, all these wonderful stories of what mothers did during the Blitz and things like that. They're amazing.
Yeah.
So and she's one of those girls. Yeah.
Could still slap her.
Nah, I love her. She's brilliant.
So what was behind your decision to set the book in Scotland? Is it an area that you both know well?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we do. I mean, my sister lives in Scotland, so living in Northumberland, like we were talking about before we started the interview. So I'm on the border, so I like 40 minutes and I'm there. And so I think Scotland, all of these little places, has got all these legends and myths from the Romans onwards. It's like undiscovered mysteries waiting, lying dormant, just waiting for someone to discover them. And you walk the hills of Scotland, and you go, oh, that's a stone circle. And all these sort of things, all these mysteries, and it's got such wonderful history, like from William Wallace to all of these other things, the Druids, the Celts, all of these things when the Roman occupation. I mean, the Romans built a wall, they were like, no, well, okay, we're stopping here. There was a good reason for that, and it's not just that, it's beautiful, it's lovely. It really is. And so,
I think, what Andy said about the myths and the legends, we wanted somewhere, and it's like Andy said, you look out the corner of your eye. And so to have a place of mists and mountains and legend, it just all fell into place that's where we should set it.
Yeah.
And the locks, the stone circles, the dolmens. The dolmens I wrote about in the Clockmaker are actually on the Isle of Lewis.
Okay.
So very ancient standing stones. But we did a lot of research about climate, what Scotland was like during the war years, what people did, where they went, how they lived. So there was a lot of research done into that in the background, and obviously a lot of research because Annette was a woman of her time, so I had to do a lot of reading of good housekeeping books set in the 1940s, and how many things you can do, interesting things with tripe. But I think there's a whole history and legends, and because it's so beautiful. It's that lovely, it's such a lovely place, nothing bad can possibly happen here yet.
Yeah. So obviously the story takes place just after the Second World War. Is this an era that you both have an interest in?
Well, yeah, I mean, my grandfather fought in World War II. He survived the war, and he basically went from the Africa campaign right away into Europe and all that. He met the Pope, and the Pope gave him a bottle of wine in
Oh,
Italy.
wow.
So my grandfather had a million different stories of all
Mhm.
of the things that he did during World War II. And so my mum, who's in the book, she's little Anne in the book.
Oh, okay.
So the event where she talks about waiting for her dad to come back for a knock on the door, that's what
Mhm.
actually happened. Nora was my grandmother. And so quite a few of those little bits like actually happened. My grandfather walking around in my grand's hat and that sort of thing. There's all these little things that happen. But I am fascinated with that sort of period. I like war games and I like war movies. And my son's interested in too. But I think from my grandfather piqued my interest. He used to tell us stories, nothing grisly, nothing too bad,
Mhm.
because we would ask him, and me and my friends would ask him. And so it's one of those interests where it just shows a lot about humanity.
Yeah.
It shows, if we look at from say like our point of view and in the British Isles, the strength of the population, the way they reacted to it, how some people say, you might say them on like, we beat Hitler with humor, and all of the hardships and everything that we went through, and it's always in the psyche of growing up, but Dad's Army, all of
Yeah.
these.
That's what I was thinking when you said that. Yeah.
It is kind
I've
of,
got the tune in
yeah,
my
yeah,
head.
yeah, exactly. It's there, and I'm interested in the airplanes and the war machines, and we go to the museums, and my children go like interested in that sort of thing as well. But it's just that it just shows the good and bad of humanity. When we
Mhm.
all know the stories, we all know the history, and my grandfather was a prisoner of war for a while
Right.
and
Okay.
escaped. In the way he talked about the German guards that looked after him, and they would, the way they treated them well, and all that sort of stuff. So his attitude towards the Germans that were there, they were just doing what they thought were right, and so there's a million different stories, and it's not just that was in so many. You've got so many technological advancements that went on during that period of time, but I just think it says so much about humanity, and there's all the stories, everything. And the Clockmaker himself, that's originally the period he started, just basically because it made sense for what he could do and what he is, and it just kind of lended itself on that. And because it's something I know about, and it's something I can easily research, and the way people talked and those sort of things, I can ring up and ask my mum.
Yeah.
And some of the characters, well, okay, that I'm writing some of the characters, the sort of like the guys on the edges, I'd sit there and think, what did my dad say? And so
Mhm.
I can almost hear my parents talking like they talk in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. So there was a lot of pluses it, but it is, yeah, like I say, for the reasons I've just said, the reasons why I am interested in that period, because it was tragic, it was horrible, it was a complete disaster, but but
And there's a
there's a
lot of
lot of,
archived material
yeah, there is,
Yeah.
that we can go
yeah,
into,
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
oral histories, the oral stories. So
Yeah.
a lot of research on that. Just, which trains were running or buses, or, how did people get from place to place? And, I think it's on the BBC, I've got an archive of the oral histories, which are very poignant.
Yeah, amazing.
So again, as a period in history, access to those archives was another reason I think we chose to set
So.
it.
And
Yeah.
it's a setting that's also like, it's still, even though it was a long time ago, it's still in memory. We can still
Mhm.
relate to it.
Yeah.
There's, all of us know something about it, a little bit. So the reader can relate to some of the things in there.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. Makes sense. So, what was the experience of writing together like? How did you decide who wrote which parts? I mean, I think you spoke about that a little bit where you talked earlier, but
Um, it's actually, I mean, we've known each other for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, I think the most important thing is to have respect for each other's words and
Mhm.
ideas. So no one person is sort of in charge. Um, yes, you know, Andy was writing the supernatural aspects. And again, I was writing the more natural side of things. I edited it at the end because a lot of people will say, if you've got two people writing a novel together, we should have two voices. And the editing was quite tricky to actually blend the voices into one, but then again, not take away Andy's words and magic. And do you know what I mean? So it is about,
Yeah, that sounds like quite a tricky balancing act.
It is something, but yeah, it's something that I think would work. We actually write the actual physically write. We do it in different ways.
yeah.
So I have like a roughly routine. So I do the school run, take the kids to school, come back, get home, stick some heavy metal on or some rock music, or sometimes a bit of dance, depending on what mood I'm. So, and then I'll write. And the music that I play tends to like reflect the sort of mood that I want to go, the rhythm of the words that I want to write. And so I walk about, plan it in my head, like I sort of like produce a movie in my head of what I want it to look like, and then I try and write down what I see. And sometimes I have conversations with myself about dialogue and stuff like that. Sounds a bit bad, but I do. And so and so I'll write that, and then we keep in contact online, but also we do sometimes where we sit together, we've both got a laptop together, sit next to each other, and we'll both type away, oh, that bit's good, let's add this. So it's a complete dialogue, and we are typing down the dialogue, or, one of us will sit typing while the other one's walking about. I've got this stick, so I like walk up.
Under there.
I've got this stick, so Ceri will type, so I'll pace up and down the living room, prance with a stick, a little bit like Gandalf or something, walking up and down the walking around. Ceri will write, and then we'll process it, and we'll think about it, and we'll talk about it. And then once we got it all down and how we wanted it to do, we did have a professional editor as well. But what Ceri did was Ceri edited properly, because like my English skills, being having a scientific background, aren't marvelous. I know spell check's a wonderful thing and Grammarly and all that, but Ceri helped that, and we put it together a story so it was tight, taken out the stuff that we didn't need, the extra bit of fluff that we probably didn't need. And so Ceri, like you say, she edited it and made it tighter. And then we passed it on to our editor, who said that she hardly needs to do anything because Ceri had done such a wonderful job. I think she changed like about 2 words or something like that. But it was important to have a professional editor to do it. But Ceri basically just edited it, really.
Oh,
well, you did basically. But yeah, that's what we do. So together, singularly, we meet up a lot, talk together.
We'll send each other what we've written via email.
Yeah.
COVID has really interrupted, because I know that's what we're going to talk about next, the sequel, because we obviously couldn't get together.
Yeah.
We've got parts written, but we need to actually, it works better, to be honest, if we're sitting together in the same room and for 3 or 4 hours. That's when it really works, because otherwise it's quite disjointed. So yeah.
Because the Clockmaker came out, it had been out sort of like a short period of time just before COVID, and then COVID hit, and so we had like all of these things lined up that we were going to do that we didn't end up doing because of COVID and lockdown and all the rest of it. Then I was homeschooling for a lot. I mean, I live in Leicestershire, so Leicestershire was like really badly hit, and our lockdown just seemed to go on forever. And so like hit it, but we still carried on with it, and we got various different bits and pieces done. So the second book starts just straight after the first one virtually. It's got a lot of the characters from the first one. I wouldn't say which ones. And it's got a lot of new characters. It's got more characters. The way I used to think of, you've ever seen the movie Alien and Aliens?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first book reminds me of Alien, and the second book reminds me of Aliens, not because there's more bad guys, just because there's more people in it, and it's on a bigger scale. But it's the same style, but we do also go back to like the Clockmaker's past and bits and pieces and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So do you want to ask us that
Sorry,
question?
sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you've flown beautifully into it, but I was going to say, is there a sequel plan
Sorry.
for the Clockmaker?
No,
If so, can you
sorry.
give me hints?
No,
But no,
Sorry.
go for it. Right,
Sorry.
you know you're already there, so please continue.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, it's fine. Yeah, go for it.
When I start talking about books, whether it's my book or anybody else's book, I just don't shut up. I just love the written word so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it is. So we wanted to do the same sort of thing. We've had quite a lot of feedback, and we got lots of nice reviews on Amazon and various different places, and we were going to local book signings, especially in places like Loughborough, sort of places where we had a good following. That's the right word to use, libraries and those sort of things, where we meet our readers. And then it was quite weird because after lockdown, we did a few things, and where you run into people who've read your book. So when you first go to lockdown, as a new writer, when you first go to like these book signings, you think no one's heard of you, no one's read your book. They buy your book for whatever reason, they like you, or they're interested in the book, or they've read a review or whatever, which is wonderful. And then but afterwards, after lockdown, you talk to people who've read it, and that's such an amazing, heartfelt thing. It's just like I can't describe too much like how much that means to meet someone who's read it, rather than someone who wants to read it, which is they're just two different things. Both of them are completely wonderful, and when you talk to people about it, they ask you, when the first, people who haven't read it, they talk about what they like to read and those sort of things. We don't just talk about our books, talk about other people's reading and stuff like that as well. And so we have people who like your sort of genres, and then but when you meet someone afterwards who's read it, is amazing, and they tell you what they think. So you get a review face to face, and so a lot of the things that have been said from reviews, but from conversations with people who we've met haven't read it, are really important to us. And so we've taken a lot on board of what they've said. Obviously, we're going to write as we want to write it, but we take on board a lot of the feedback that we've got, and yeah, so it's really good. So there's some of that too.
So it's called A Perfect Child.
Okay.
And it's still got the same characters. So it's got Annette, Duncan, who's older. He goes to boarding school because he's a very bright little boy. And again, this is where the research comes in, that they stopped schooling at 14, but he's a very bright little boy, so he gets a scholarship and he goes to boarding school. The Clockmaker reappears, and we've got other groups of people in it this time. Again, it's supernatural, unsettling. Annette's business in the little B&B has picked up, so she's doing very well, and she's made friends. We've got a group of travelling fairground people that are quite involved in it as well. There's a lot of Andy's written a lot about where the Clockmaker actually came from, because that, again, a lot of people asked those questions. They said, can we find out a little bit more about his past? So that's in there as well. Yeah,
I mean, because it was a bit weird, because quite a lot of his past was in optics, so we lifted out, but when you say the Clockmaker appears, so he's not the same person. Let's just put it this way: he's different to what he is in the first one. I'm just going to say that because I don't want to put any spoilers in. But so the Clockmaker in the first book is not the same as the Clockmaker. So I'll just leave it at that. But it's we took. There's also a little bit of Scottish mystery in there, but a bit of myths and legends in there. So there's quite a bit without any one thing smothering the other. So we've expanded.
And it's going to be a bigger book.
Yeah, it is.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
It's thicker
because it's going to be thicker because we were cautious about the length of the Clockmaker, because it's our first together and we didn't really know how it was going to go.
No, we didn't. And we sort of ended it where we thought it was the right length, but the second one is a bit longer, and there's more of everyone's history now.
It's absolutely fantastic. So obviously Ceri and Drew were talking now a little bit about signings, and we've got a signing in our shop at the Book Dragon at 6 West Road, Stockton-on-Tees tomorrow between 2 and 4 p.m, where you'll be able to meet Ceri and Drew in person. Be able to pick up a copy of their wonderful creation, The Clockmaker, and get them to personally sign it for you. So come along to that.
We'd love to see you.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing you myself in person, instead of on the screen. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to find out more about your writing and The Clockmaker. And everyone, come and get your copies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure. Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.